I knew something was wrong when no one met me at the gate. After 5 hours in the air, 2 through security, and 1 waiting at baggage claim with no call or message, I finally opened the rideshare app and ordered a car myself. It was humid in San Diego, the kind of coastal air that clings to your skin. I held my purse close and sat on the bench outside Terminal 2, watching the palm trees shiver in the breeze, wondering if maybe they'd simply forgotten the time. They hadn't. They hadn't planned to come at all. The driver, a young woman with chipped turquoise nails, helped with my suitcase and asked, "Visiting family?" I smiled politely. "Yes, my son's wedding." She glanced at me in the mirror. "Big day. You must be so proud." I gave a small nod. I wasn't sure what I felt. Oliver hadn't seen me in over 3 years. He called twice a year, on my birthday and Christmas, both times sounding distracted, like he had 1 foot out the door. But when he announced his engagement to Caitlyn, he did it in a group email. No phone call, no personal word. Just a digital card with pastel fonts and a stock photo of palm trees. I told myself he was busy, that maybe I had failed to keep up. Maybe he thought I wouldn't care. But I did, more than he'd ever know. When the car pulled up to the address he'd sent me, I blinked at the building. It wasn't his house. It was a hotel. A modest chain, the kind with free breakfast and beige carpets that always smell faintly of bleach. At the desk, a young man checked me in without surprise. "Your son booked this for you, just 1 night. Checkout is noon tomorrow." I signed the paper slowly. Just 1 night. Upstairs, the room was neat, impersonal. A towel folded into a swan sat on the bed. I unpacked in silence. No note from Oliver. No welcome basket. I opened my suitcase, pulled out my navy blue dress and hung it on the door handle. A simple thing with sleeves, the kind I could wear to both a wedding and a funeral. I'd worn it once before, to my sister's burial. But the dress didn't care what the occasion was. It just waited. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the muted TV. A commercial for cruise vacations played on loop. Outside, the sun lowered behind the skyline. I checked my phone. No message. Around 7, I finally sent him one myself. Me. Landed safely, at the hotel. Let me know if you need help tomorrow. No response. At 9:30, the silence in the room grew loud. I made myself some tea with the tiny machine in the corner, sipping it slowly while scrolling through old photos on my phone. Oliver at 10, holding a baseball. Oliver in his college robe. Oliver with Caitlyn in a photo I'd never seen, her arms around him at some vineyard. She looked beautiful, effortless. The kind of woman who made you feel underdressed no matter what you wore. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The hotel curtains let in slivers of pale light. I showered, dressed, and pinned up my gray hair. I wore pearl earrings, a gift from my late husband, Julian, and a soft pink scarf that once belonged to his mother. I stared at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like a stranger. I looked like someone trying not to hope. At 8:30, my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, this is Amanda from Coastal Bloom Events. Just checking in. You're Mrs. Holloway, correct? The mother of the groom?" "Yes," I replied. "Great. We have you scheduled for table 17. The ceremony starts at 3. The venue address should be in your email." "I haven't received anything." A pause. Papers rustling. Looks like we sent the details to Caitlyn's parents' list. I'll forward it to you now. Sorry about that." "That's fine." Table 17. Later, when I arrived at the venue, a glossy, all-white structure near the cliffs, The parking lot was already full. I walked slowly, careful in my low heels. At the entrance, a young woman with a clipboard smiled at me but didn't know my name. I gave it twice before she nodded and pointed me toward the ceremony garden. There were chairs set in rows, ribbons fluttering in the sea wind. People stood in clusters, laughing and hugging. I looked for my son. I didn't see him. Then I heard her voice. "Everyone, this is Miriam. She used to be married to Oliver's father." I turned. Caitlyn stood beside a group of middle-aged guests, one manicured hand resting on a friend's arm. She said it lightly, almost fondly, like introducing a family relic. I stared at her. Not Oliver's mother, not the groom's mom. No, I was the late Julian Holloway's ex-wife. That's who I was now. And Oliver, standing right behind her, said nothing. I didn't react right away. Years of silence train you to hesitate, to check your own temperature before responding. I simply gave a small, neutral smile, as if Caitlyn had introduced me properly, as if I weren't just turned into a stranger at my own son's wedding. The group around her murmured polite greetings. One man offered his hand. "Nice to meet you." I shook it. He didn't know. How could he? Oliver was adjusting his cufflinks, still silent, still pretending I hadn't heard. "I'll be in the third row," I said calmly. Caitlyn smiled, already turning back to her circle. Her dress shimmered in the morning light. Sleek, tasteful, expensive. I walked away slowly, legs stiff under the weight of it all. The chairs were filling up. White petals lined the aisle. A woman in a headset motioned me to a row near the back. "Reserved for extended family," she whispered. I looked at the card on the seat. My name wasn't there, just guest table 17. I sat. The ceremony was lovely. Too lovely, if I'm being honest. The kind of perfection that leaves no room for memory. Vows rehearsed, not felt. The words Caitlyn read sounded like a Pinterest board. Oliver smiled, though big, charming, sincere. He looked happy. Or maybe he looked relieved. Not once during the ceremony did he glance my way. They kissed. Everyone clapped. Cameras clicked, and I sat in the last row, hands folded over my purse, waiting for my cue to vanish. At the reception, a shuttle bus carried guests to the ballroom. I asked if I could ride with the family. The driver looked confused. "Only immediate family in this one, ma'am." Of course. I waited for the next. When I arrived at the venue, a high-ceilinged hall with crystal chandeliers and a string quartet in the corner, my name wasn't on the main seating chart. I found a coordinator who checked her list again. Ah, yes. Table 17, right by the kitchen. She smiled as if that made up for something. I made my way through the hall. The tables glittered with gold cutlery and embossed menus. The centerpieces were towers of white orchids. At table 17, there were 7 people already seated, none of whom I recognized. A distant cousin of Caitlyn's, an old co-worker of Oliver's. A couple who'd flown in from Vancouver and didn't know anyone else. I smiled and sat, quiet, civil. A ghost in pearls. From across the room, I could see Oliver laughing with Caitlyn and her parents. He looked relaxed. I saw them toast. Then her father stood and made a speech about 2 wonderful families coming together. Julian's name was mentioned. My name was not. No one had asked me for a photo with the couple, no corsage, no mention in the program. Even my title, Mother of the Groom, had been quietly erased. I sipped the wine. I nodded at the stranger beside me. I listened to a man talk about sailing. I pretended not to notice that Oliver's high school English teacher was seated closer to the dance floor than I was. Later, as dinner was served, I slipped away to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror. I didn't cry. I pressed my hands to the counter and let the weight of it all settle in my spine. When I returned, dessert had already been served. Someone had taken my seat, assuming I'd left. I didn't ask for it back. I stood near the wall instead, like an usher without a role. The music started. People began to dance. First the couple, then the families, then the special people, announced by name over the microphone. Father of the bride. Stepmother of the groom. I froze. Stepmother? Oliver's father had died 10 years ago. His second wife, Eleanor, had married him late in life. They were together less than 5 years before his stroke. She was never close to Oliver, barely attended birthdays. She was now slow dancing with him in the middle of the floor. I stepped back, found the exit. The air outside was warm, buzzing with summer. And still, no one noticed I was gone. Until I heard a voice behind me. Mimi? I turned. June, my granddaughter from Oliver's first marriage. She was 19 now, tall, sharp-eyed, awkward in the shoulders like I used to be. Her brown curls frizzed in the humidity. I saw you leave, she said. Are you okay? I nodded. It's too loud inside. She studied me. They didn't put you at the family table. No. She bit her lip. Dad said, I know what your dad said. Silence. Then, he's not always kind. I looked at her then, really looked. Her heels were too high for her feet. Her mascara was smudged from humidity or maybe frustration. And yet, she stood with her spine straight, as if she had decided not to be small. I took her hand. Come, I said. Let's walk. We walked along the hedge-lined path behind the venue, where string lights hovered like low stars above the garden. The further we went, the quieter the music became, replaced by the soft rustle of leaves and the far-off murmur of the ocean. June didn't speak for a while. She just held my hand as we walked, like she used to when she was little and needed to feel someone solid beside her. Grandma, she said eventually, why didn't you say something? To who? I asked gently. To Dad, to Caitlyn, to everyone, that you're his mother, that you helped pay for this wedding. I paused, because part of me still hoped I was imagining it, that the oversight was a mistake, not an intention, that Oliver, my own son, hadn't decided I was expendable. But now, standing in the garden under flickering bulbs, it was impossible to keep lying to myself. I didn't want to cause a scene, I said. I thought, maybe I misunderstood. Maybe someone would correct it. They won't, she said plainly. They didn't forget. Caitlyn's mom told me a few days ago that you were graciously letting Eleanor attend in your place. I stopped walking. In my place? June nodded. They told people you weren't well enough to fly, that you insisted Eleanor come as the motherly figure instead. A strange laugh escaped me. It was sharp and hollow. I had never once said anything of the sort. I had RSVP'd months ago. I booked my own flight. I bought my own dress. I arranged time off from my part-time job at the local library just to be here. And still, I wasn't part of this wedding. I was erased. June looked up at me. Do you want to leave? I did. Every cell in my body begged to be anywhere but here. But I wasn't ready to disappear. Not like this. Not quietly. No, I said. I want to finish the evening. I want them to see me, to remember I was here. June squeezed my hand. Then I'll sit with you. We walked back toward the building. Just as we reached the edge of the patio, Caitlyn's voice rang out over the speakers. And to everyone who's made today so magical, she was saying, standing with a glass of champagne in hand. Especially to the incredible people who shaped Oliver into the man I fell in love with. His father, Julian, and my parents. And of course, my wonderful mother-in-law, Eleanor. Applause. My name was never mentioned. June's hand trembled in mine. Inside, we returned to table 17, where no one had noticed I'd been gone. I pulled out my chair and sat, quietly, while June sat beside me. No one said a word. No one asked where I'd been. As the next course arrived, some elaborate reduction of something soft and bland, June leaned in. Do you want me to say something? No, baby. You should. They need to be embarrassed. I smiled sadly. They're not embarrassed, sweetheart. That's the problem. Across the room, Oliver and Caitlyn were on the dance floor, arms around each other, faces lit by fairy lights. They looked like the kind of couple who'd appear in a wedding magazine. Carefully curated, beautiful, polished. And I, the woman who gave him life, was seated next to a man explaining cryptocurrency to an exhausted cousin from Iowa. June reached into her purse and pulled out something wrapped in a napkin. I brought you a piece of cake. The good one. The fancy almond one with the real buttercream. I looked at her, startled. I knew they wouldn't bring any to this table. A silence stretched between us, the kind only deep love can hold. I took the cake. Thank you, June. You're the only one who ever sends me birthday cards, or asks about my exams, or remembers how I like my tea. I see you, Grandma. I held her gaze, then looked away before my throat gave in. There are moments in life when something breaks. Not loudly, not with a scream or a dramatic collapse. Quietly, cleanly, like a thread pulled free from fabric, and you know it will never weave back the same way again. I sat for the rest of the evening without expectation. No more hope that someone would stand and say, "Wait, we forgot Miriam." No fantasy of Oliver pulling me to the dance floor. Just the simple, steady presence of a girl who still knew what love looked like. When it came time for the couple to say goodbye and climb into their getaway car, June and I stayed seated. We didn't wave. We didn't clap. We simply watched. And when the room began to empty and people gathered coats and favors and half-finished glasses of wine, I stood, walked outside, and ordered a ride. June insisted on walking me to the car. "Will you be okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I've been through worse." "I'll call you tomorrow." I touched her cheek. "That would be lovely." As the car pulled away, I didn't look back at the venue. I looked forward, toward the hotel, toward my suitcase, toward the life I had left waiting in Portland. A life where I was not a mistake, or an oversight, or someone's ex-anything. The hotel room was quiet when I returned, the kind of quiet that doesn't comfort you. It just confirms you're alone. I kicked off my shoes and sat on the edge of the bed, my dress still buttoned to the neck, my hands resting in my lap. I hadn't spoken to Oliver once that day, not a single word. Not when I arrived, not during the ceremony, not at the reception. We hadn't even made eye contact. It was as if he'd choreographed the entire day to exclude me with surgical precision. Never rude, never loud, just absent. I looked down at my hands. I'd worn the same ring since 1974, a simple silver band Julian had given me when we couldn't afford anything else. I never replaced it, even after his death. Even when Oliver started calling me old-fashioned, behind a laugh. I took it off slowly and set it on the nightstand. The dress came next. I hung it back on the door like I'd done the night before, though this time I knew I wouldn't be wearing it again. Not for Oliver. Not for anyone who couldn't say my name without choking on their pride. I sat at the small desk, opened my tablet, and logged into the wedding portal the planner had sent months ago. My name was buried in the back end of the billing system, tied to several vendor invoices. Catering, paid in full by me. Floral arrangements, me. Photography deposit, me. It had been my gift. A silent one. I'd asked to remain anonymous, thinking it would preserve dignity, thinking it would keep Oliver from objecting. He'd never thanked me, but I told myself it was because he didn't know. Now I wasn't sure what he knew, or what he pretended not to know. At the bottom of the invoice list, I saw a final payment scheduled for tomorrow, the last of the balance for the venue itself. It would clear automatically from my account. A final bow, courtesy of the woman seated next to the kitchen. My fingers hovered over the contact information for the coordinator, and then I paused. Not yet. Not out of rage. Not out of wounded pride. I needed to think, and when I acted, it would be clear, irreversible, and mine. I closed the tablet. Instead, I reached into my suitcase and pulled out a letter I hadn't intended to deliver. Not today, maybe not ever. I'd written it on the flight here, folded it 3 times, and tucked it into an envelope marked for Oliver. It wasn't bitter. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. A letter from a mother to her son, full of quiet questions and the soft sorrow of decades gone by too quickly. I hadn't known if I'd give it to him. Now I knew I wouldn't. I tore it in half, then in half again. Then I cried. Not the heaving sobs of a woman scorned, but the slow, quiet tears of someone who has spent a lifetime waiting for the child she raised to come home. Not to her house, but to her heart. When I stopped, I made tea in the little hotel kettle and drank it slowly, staring out the window at the blinking lights of San Diego. It had always seemed so far from Portland. Now it just looked small. I went to bed without setting an alarm. In the middle of the night, I woke once, disoriented, reaching instinctively for Julian. And then I remembered. He'd been gone 10 years, and now Oliver was gone too. Just in a different way. In the morning, my phone lit up with a message. June. Morning, Grandma. Just checking on you. I hope you slept okay. I meant it last night. I see you. Call me when you're ready. I held the phone to my chest. That message, just those 28 words, felt more like home than anything Oliver had said in the last decade. I sat at the desk again, opened the banking app. The balance stared back at me. Not infinite, but enough. Enough to choose. Enough to change course. Then I called my attorney. His assistant answered, bright and efficient. Good morning, this is Nadia at Blakely & Moore. Hi, Nadia, this is Miriam Holloway. I'd like to make changes to my estate documents, and I'd like to do it today. There was a pause. Absolutely, Mrs. Holloway. I'll check Mr. Moore's availability. I smiled into the phone, a soft, private smile. One only I could see. Thank you, dear. No rush. I've already waited long enough. The office of Blakely & Moore was located in a modest building downtown, far from the glinting wedding venues and rooftop bars where Caitlyn's people liked to gather. I'd been there once before, after Julian died, to sort out the will, the accounts, the kinds of business you don't expect to handle alone until you suddenly are. Mr. Moore was waiting when I arrived. A tall man with a receding hairline and the steady hands of someone who didn't need to raise his voice to be heard. He greeted me with warmth, not pity, and that already felt like a small kindness. "I'm sorry it's under these circumstances," he said, motioning for me to sit. "I'm not," I replied. That seemed to surprise him, but he nodded and opened his notepad. "What would you like to change?" "Everything." I removed a thin folder from my bag and slid it across the table. "My current will leaves the majority of my estate to my son, Oliver Holloway. That's no longer appropriate." Mr. Moore studied me for a moment, then flipped open the folder. "I want the house in Portland placed into a living trust, in my name, with a beneficiary designation to my granddaughter, June. I want the wedding payments canceled where possible, and I'd like to remove Oliver as the executor of my estate." He didn't write immediately. "May I ask what prompted the change?" I looked out the window. The sky was bright with early summer light. Somewhere out there, Oliver and Caitlyn were probably opening gifts, basking in the glow of their carefully planned life. One without me in it. "I was introduced yesterday," I said slowly, "as his late father's ex-wife. Not as his mother. Not as the person who paid for half their wedding. Not even as someone worth a mention." Mr. Moore nodded gravely. "I understand. And yet I don't want to be vindictive. This isn't about revenge." "Then what is it about?" "Dignity," I said simply. "And clarity. I've spent years pretending things were fine, smoothing over insult with hope. I don't want to do that anymore." He began to take notes. I watched the pen glide over the paper like a release. "Do you want to make a new will entirely or amend the current one?" "New," I said. "Clean start." "And the trust for June?" "I want her to have control when she turns 25. Until then, I'll manage it. She's the only person in this family who still sees me. Really sees me." He looked up. "That's rare." "She's rare." We spent the next hour going through the details: account numbers, property information, medical directives. It was methodical, quiet, steadying. When we were finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Mrs. Holloway, you're doing something most people take decades to consider." "I'm 74, I said with a small smile. "I don't have decades to spare." He chuckled. As I stood to leave, he asked gently, "Do you want him to know?" I paused at the door. "Eventually," I said, "but not yet. First, I want to know who I am without him." Back at the hotel, I changed into my travel clothes, loose linen pants and a soft blue cardigan that Julian used to say made me look like a cloud on a mission. I packed the dress carefully, folding it not out of sentiment, but respect. The earrings came off. The pearls went back in their velvet box. At noon, I checked out. The front desk clerk asked if I'd enjoyed my stay. I smiled politely. It was illuminating. Outside, the sun warmed my shoulders as I waited for the cab. My suitcase was small, worn, and still carried a faint scent of lavender sachets. A little battered, but still reliable, like me. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not June. I'd call her from the airport. Not Oliver. He hadn't called at all. As the cab pulled away from the curb, I watched the streets roll by in reverse. Boutique coffee shops, wedding photographers' studios, palm trees lining sidewalks like exclamation marks in a sentence I no longer wanted to finish. At the airport, I moved slowly. No rush now. I passed couples holding hands, families arguing over luggage, children asleep on shoulders. I had none of that. And yet, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like less. At the gate, I sat by the window and opened a small notebook. I began writing. Not a letter, not a list, just thoughts. Loose? Imperfect? True. Things I will no longer apologize for. My age, my softness, wanting to be seen, saying no, changing my mind. I underlined the last one twice. Changing my mind. The flight home was uneventful. I sat by the window, sipping ginger ale and letting the hum of the plane fill the spaces where grief used to press too hard. The woman next to me, early 40s, crisp blouse, laptop always open, asked once if I needed anything. I said no. She didn't speak again. Perfect. When we landed in Portland, the air felt heavier, like it always did after California. But it also felt familiar. Honest. I took a cab home, declining the driver's offer to help with my bag. My hands knew the weight. The porch light was still on. I'd left it that way, out of habit. My gardenia plant had bloomed while I was gone. It always did best when I left it alone. Inside, I slipped off my shoes, set the suitcase by the door, and stood for a long while in the center of my living room. Nothing had changed. The same quiet clock, the same quilt on the sofa, the same faint smell of lemon oil from my last cleaning spree. But something inside me was different. I wasn't waiting anymore. I made tea and stood by the window while it steeped, watching the neighbor's cat tiptoe along the fence like it owned the world. I admired the nerve of it. Then I opened the drawer beneath the side table, the one I hadn't touched in months, and pulled out the manila folder labeled Oliver. Inside were years of receipts, photocopies, and bank transfer printouts. Tuition fees, first apartment deposit, his first wedding, which he'd also let me help fund, even the emergency dental surgery he'd needed after falling off a bike in college. I'd paid that bill too. I spread them on the table like tarot cards. What would they tell me if I read them now? That I'd always helped, that I'd always given, that none of it had bought love. I found one receipt in particular, a florist charge from 13 years ago. Valentine's Day. He'd forgotten to buy flowers for his first wife, so I'd ordered them for him. He hadn't even reimbursed me. I laughed. Not bitter, just tired. Then I picked up the entire stack and walked them to the fireplace. The matchbook from Julian's memorial still sat in the tray nearby. I struck a match and fed the folder to the flames. Let the past keep itself. That night, I slept deeply, the kind of sleep that doesn't come from exhaustion, but from release. When I woke the next morning, it was raining. Light, misty Portland rain that patters like memory but doesn't flood. I spent the morning tending the back garden. Weeds had taken over the rosemary bush, and the tomatoes needed tying. I worked slowly, with care. I didn't think about the wedding. I didn't think about Oliver. I thought about the way June had pressed cake into my hand like a peace offering in a war neither of us started. I'd call her today. I wasn't in a hurry. By noon, I had the hose coiled, my gloves drying, and a chicken roasting in the oven. I had no guests. I just wanted something that tasted like comfort. And then the phone rang. It wasn't June. It was Oliver. The name on the screen sat like a dare. I didn't answer it. I let it ring until the voicemail picked up. Then the text came. Oliver. Hey, I didn't see you at brunch today. You left already? Brunch. I stared at the words like they were in another language. There had been a post-wedding brunch, of course, for close family and friends. Of course. I typed back 3 words, then erased them, typed 5 more, then deleted again. Finally, I set the phone down without responding. He called again 2 hours later. I ignored it again. This time, he left a message. Mom, I just, I wanted to check in. Caitlyn said you seemed quiet yesterday. Look, if something's wrong, can we talk? I know the wedding was a lot. Let's not leave things weird, okay? Weird. That's what he called it. Not cruel, not humiliating, just weird. I didn't call back. Instead, I called June. Hey, Grandma, she answered on the second ring, voice bright and tired at once. Hi, darling, I said. How's the headache? Gone now. Caitlyn's mom was pouring Prosecco like it was water. Sounds about right. There was a pause. You okay? She asked. I am now. I've been thinking about you all morning. I've been thinking about you too. She hesitated. Dad asked if you were mad at him. I'm not mad, I said. I'm done pretending. She didn't ask what I meant. You want me to come over? Soon, I said. But today, I'm roasting a chicken for myself, for once. June laughed. Good. You deserve it. When we hung up, I set the phone face down and walked to the oven. The smell was rich, savory, grounding. I took the pan out, set it on the counter, and stood there for a while, letting the steam rise. I didn't need a table of 17 strangers. I didn't need a title spoken through clenched smiles. I needed this. A quiet home, a warm kitchen, and the knowledge that I could still choose myself. The next few days passed in a kind of calm I hadn't felt in years. I didn't check my voicemail. I didn't refresh my messages. I didn't scroll through any social feeds, waiting for someone to say my name. The world outside could keep spinning. I had my own orbit now. In the morning, I'd walk the neighborhood loop with my hands tucked in the sleeves of my sweater, nodding to the same old faces. Carol from 2 doors down, still fighting with her roses. Mr. Wong, always sweeping his driveway like it owed him something. We didn't exchange more than pleasantries, but even that felt grounding. I was visible here. The day after the wedding, I'd received 3 more texts from Oliver. Oliver. Can we talk? Oliver. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Oliver. I'd like to explain. I didn't respond. Partly because I didn't know what I'd say, but mostly because I wanted to sit with the silence, to see what he'd do with it. By the end of the week, a letter arrived. Not handwritten, printed, neat font. No return address, but I recognized the clipped tone before I even opened the envelope. Mom, I'm sorry you felt excluded. That was never our intention. The wedding was chaotic, and if your seating or introductions seemed off, it wasn't meant as a slight. Caitlyn was under a lot of pressure, and the planner may have misunderstood some of the arrangements. I do hope you enjoyed yourself. Let's catch up soon. Love, Oliver. That was it. I read it twice, searching for something. A crack, a flicker of honesty, an ounce of grief. I found nothing, not a single mention of the word mother, not a single apology that used his own voice. Just a polite shrug wrapped in paper. I folded the letter once, slowly, and slid it back into the envelope. Then I tucked it into the drawer where I used to keep birthday cards and school drawings and notes scribbled in crayon, the place where love lived. It didn't belong there, but it didn't belong anywhere else either, and I wasn't about to pretend it never arrived. 2 days later, June called again. Can I come over this weekend? She asked. Of course. Just me, though, nobody else. I told them I had work. You didn't need an excuse. I know, but it's easier. I understood. When Saturday came, she arrived with a bouquet of tulips and 2 slices of pie from that little cafe on Alder Street. I know yours is better, she said, but I didn't want to make you bake. I smiled and took the box. Then you've already done something they never did. We sat on the back porch with our plates balanced on our knees, watching the light move across the fence. June wore a sweater 3 sizes too big and no makeup. She looked like herself. Not someone's daughter or guest or name on a seating chart. Just June. "I've been thinking," she said between bites, "about all of it. The wedding, Dad, everything. So have I. I used to think family just was. You're born into it, and that's that. And now, I think it's what you choose to protect, and what protects you back." I nodded. Sometimes the people you gave everything to forget you were ever there, and the ones you barely expected anything from turn around and bring you pie. She looked at me, eyes full. "You gave up so much for them." "I know. They don't deserve it." "Maybe not." She hesitated. "I don't know how to fix it. Or if it can be fixed." "Sweetheart," I said gently, "it's not your job to fix anything. It's just your job to keep your heart open, but only for those who won't use it as a doormat." She laughed, even as her eyes misted over. "Grandma, you're kind of a badass." "I'm old," I said. "That's the same thing, eventually." We finished our pie and drank tea, and I showed her the new trust paperwork. She tried to object at first. "Are you sure?" "I am." "But you're the only one who never made me feel like an obligation." She didn't speak after that, just leaned her head on my shoulder as the sky turned pink and the wind picked up. Later, when she left, she hugged me tighter than she ever had before. "I love you," she said. "I know," I whispered back. "That's the only reason I'm still standing." Sunday morning arrived with the smell of rain and the ache in my left hip that always came when the weather turned. I stayed in bed longer than usual, the quilt pulled up to my chin, the quiet wrapping around me like a second skin. There was no need to rush. For once, no obligations, no lists of favors disguised as family duty. I got up slowly, boiled water for tea, and pulled a sweater over my nightgown. I stepped outside onto the porch with my mug in hand and watched the street glisten in the early light. Portland rain had a gentleness to it. Even the clouds knew how to fall softly here. Across the street, Carol was already out trimming her roses. She waved. I waved back. It was the kind of morning that asked for stillness, and I gladly obliged. The phone rang around 10. Not a call. A FaceTime. From Oliver. I stared at it as it rang, the screen flashing his name beside a frozen image of him and Caitlyn, both smiling on some mountain hike. A photo I'd never seen. One I hadn't been asked to take. I let it ring twice more before answering. He appeared on the screen, slightly out of frame, holding the phone too close. His hair was messy, and the lighting was poor. "Hey," he said. "Hi, Mom." "Hello, Oliver." A pause. He glanced to the side before continuing. "Just wanted to check in. I know things have been weird." That word again. "I got your letter," I said. He shifted. "Yeah, I figured that might not be enough." "It wasn't." He looked away. "Okay, fair." Another pause. I waited. I wasn't going to do the work for him anymore. "I didn't realize Caitlyn introduced you like that," he said. "As, Dad's ex. She didn't mean anything by it." "No?" I said quietly. "I mean, it just came out wrong. She was nervous. The day was stressful." "So it was a mistake." He hesitated. "Not exactly. I mean, look, I didn't think it mattered that much. You were there. It was a big day." I tilted my head. "You didn't think your mother's place in your life mattered?" His mouth opened, then closed again. "Oliver," I said, voice calm but firm. Did you notice that I was seated behind the cousins of Caitlyn's college roommate? He looked embarrassed. That wasn't intentional. I wasn't mentioned in the program. I wasn't introduced. You gave a speech and thanked your stepmother, but not the woman who raised you. He rubbed his jaw. I know, I messed that up. I paid for your wedding. That stopped him. I know, he said quietly. I didn't want you to, remember? I told you not to make a big deal. And so I didn't. I stayed invisible. And you let me. His face twisted, not in pain, but in discomfort. The way a man twists when truth makes the floor unsteady. Why, Oliver? He blinked. Why what? Why didn't you want me seen? He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. It's not about not wanting you there. But it is, I said, with a strange, aching peace. Because if it wasn't, you'd have made sure I was. He swallowed. It's just, Caitlyn's family is different. They're very polished. He nodded. And I'm not. He didn't answer. I let the silence hang because I wanted him to feel it. Not to punish him, but because I was done protecting people from the weight of their own choices. I loved you through things you'll never remember, I said softly. Through colic and fever and heartbreak and poor decisions. I held the door open for you again and again, even when you didn't knock. And still, you walked past me like I was wallpaper. Something functional. Something beige. Mom, I'm not angry, I said. I'm just awake now. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry, he said finally. I know. I don't know how to fix it. I do, I said. You can start by learning how to say my name in a room full of people. Not as a footnote, not as an afterthought. He looked stunned. You mean, just say, this is my mom? Yes, I said. That would have been enough. He nodded slowly, like he was trying to memorize it. The screen shifted. Caitlyn had entered the frame, holding a coffee mug. Is that your mom? She asked, too brightly. Oliver looked at me. Do you want to talk to her? No, I said gently. He looked surprised. Maybe one day, I added. But not today. He nodded again. Okay. I ended the call before he could say more. Not out of cruelty, but because I wanted the last word to be mine. Later that afternoon, I found myself reorganizing the bookshelf in the living room. Not because it needed it, but because my hands wanted something to do while my mind settled. The phone sat face down on the coffee table. Silent now. The conversation with Oliver had left a strange taste. Not bitter, not sweet, but something between, like oversteeped tea. I didn't regret answering, but I wasn't ready to hope again either. I slid the books into new rows. Memoirs on one shelf, cookbooks on another, gardening manuals below. My fingers lingered on one spine. The Joy of Cooking, 1972 edition, full of penciled notes in the margins. Julian's handwriting. He always thought nutmeg made everything better. In the back of the book was a folded grocery list in my own hand, yellowed with age. Carrots, parsley, Tylenol, cake mix, eggs, and one word in capital letters. Oliver's birthday. I hadn't meant to keep it, but there it was. I slid the list back into the book and placed it carefully on the shelf. Some things weren't about letting go. Some things were just about putting them where they belonged. The doorbell rang just before 5. I wasn't expecting anyone. I dried my hands and opened the door. Caitlyn. She stood there in a trench coat and jeans, a tote bag on her shoulder, hair down, makeup minimal, which only made her look more composed. She held a bakery box in one hand. I hope this isn't a bad time, she said. I stepped aside, not speaking, and she walked in like she'd been rehearsing it in the car. I didn't come to argue, she said quickly, or to explain. I wanted to say something face to face. I said nothing. Let her carry the weight. She set the bakery box down on the coffee table. Lemon Tart, from Bees. June said it's your favorite. I didn't move. She looked around the living room as if it might bite her. You have a beautiful home. What is it you wanted to say? I asked finally. Caitlyn took a breath. I didn't realize what I'd done until after, at the wedding. I raised my eyebrows. No, she corrected herself. That's not true. I realized while I was doing it. I just didn't stop. I waited. You intimidated me, she said, voice quiet. Not because you were harsh, but because I didn't know how to read you. Oliver told me bits and pieces, always with that edge he gets when he doesn't want to be vulnerable. And I filled in the rest myself. She looked down. And then you showed up, and you were elegant and composed and calm, and I felt like a child next to you. So I tried to shrink you, in front of everyone. Her voice trembled. I'm sorry. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. It was just there, a sentence that cost something. I nodded. Thank you. She glanced up, surprised by the ease of it. You know, I said softly, I don't need to be adored. I've lived too long for that. But I do expect to be seen, especially by the people marrying into this family. Caitlyn nodded. I didn't see you. I saw what I was afraid of. And what was that? That Oliver might still need you more than he needed me. That landed somewhere deep. I sat down slowly. He doesn't. Her eyes flicked to mine. I don't say that to comfort you, I said. I say it because it's the truth. He hasn't needed me in a long time. And that's fine. That's part of raising a child. You teach them how to walk away. But it doesn't mean you stop being the one who gave them legs. She exhaled. I'm not angry anymore, I added. But I am changed. I can see that. Good. She looked at the tart. Can I leave this? You can. She stood, hesitating. Would you ever want to try again? With me, I mean. Not to be friends. Just to not be strangers. I considered her. I think, I said, I'd like to wait and see how you treat June first. That'll tell me what I need to know. Her face softened. Fair. She turned to leave. At the door, she paused. I'm glad you answered his call. I didn't answer for him, I said. I answered for myself. She nodded once and stepped out into the fading light. I closed the door gently behind her and looked at the lemon tart on the table. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Some gestures take time to taste. That night, I sat in the kitchen with a single slice of the lemon tart on a blue ceramic plate. The edges were too neat, the glaze too shiny, like a dessert trying too hard to impress. I took a small bite. It was good. Not better than mine, but good. I didn't eat the rest. I covered the plate and placed it in the fridge. I wasn't punishing her. I just wasn't ready to consume anything Caitlyn offered, no matter how sweet it looked. I spent the rest of the evening reading. Nothing heavy. A gardening journal I'd bought years ago and never finished. There was a section about winter pruning, how certain plants needed to be cut back to the root in order to grow again. It wasn't cruelty. It was necessity. The tree doesn't mourn the lost branch. It simply waits for the next season. That night, I slept without dreams. When I woke, the sky outside my window was the kind of soft gray Portland wears like a shawl in late summer. I made coffee. No tea today. By 9, I was out in the front garden, trimming the lavender. The bees were lazy this morning. Or maybe I was. My body moved slowly, but my mind felt sharper than it had in weeks. I was beginning to feel real again, not like someone's forgotten guest, but like someone with a place. The mail arrived late that day. When I brought it in, there was an envelope addressed to Mrs. Miriam Holloway. Handwritten, neat, deliberate. Inside was a card. Thick, cream paper with embossed edges. The handwriting was June's. Dear Grandma, I wanted to say something important without fumbling it over the phone. I've spent a lot of time feeling caught between people, between what I owe and what I feel. But I've made a decision. I'm going to start saving to move out. Maybe to Portland. Maybe not right away, but soon. I want to build something that feels real, something that doesn't shrink me, and I want to do it with people who see me. Thank you for being my first mirror. Love, June. I sat with the card in my lap for a long time, my hands still dusted with soil. I didn't cry, not out of restraint, just peace. Later that day, I called my lawyer again. I want to add something, I told Mr. Moore, to the trust. He was ready with his pen. Of course. If June wants to use it to study, to move, to build something, anything, I want her to know she doesn't need permission. From me. From anyone. It's hers. Understood. And if she wants to start a business, or even a life with someone else, I want that protected too. He paused. You're very thorough, Mrs. Holloway. I've lived long enough to know the difference between freedom and inheritance. He chuckled. I'll write it up. I thanked him and ended the call. Then I sat back and looked around my kitchen. Same white cabinets, same chipped mug, same quiet hum from the old fridge. But I felt like I was in a new house. A house where decisions were mine, where silence wasn't a default, where memory lived but didn't own me. That afternoon, I baked. Not for anyone else. Not for a party or a thank you or an apology in disguise. Just for myself. An almond cake, the kind Julian used to love, dense and rich and golden around the edges. I didn't rush it. I let it cool completely. I sliced a single piece and sat on the porch with it and a cup of black coffee. And I thought about June, about what it meant to be the first mirror for someone, not the most successful, not the loudest, not the best dressed at the wedding, just the one who reflected her back to herself. Whole. Possible? Enough. I didn't hear from Oliver again for 2 weeks. Not a call, not a message, not a forwarded photo from the wedding album. Nothing. I didn't miss it. Instead, I lived. Not dramatically, but deliberately. I met Carol for tea on Tuesday. I repotted the fern in the hallway. I donated 3 coats I hadn't worn in years and found a notebook in the back of my closet where I'd once started writing a cookbook. I flipped through it slowly, page by page, like opening a time capsule sealed by distraction. I wasn't rebuilding. That word felt too loud. I was rediscovering. And then one morning, a Tuesday again, a package arrived. No note, no return address, just a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside, a wedding album, the kind made by professionals. Thick pages, satin finish, perfect lighting. Their names embossed on the cover in gold. Caitlyn and Oliver. July 19th, San Diego. I ran my fingers over the letters, not sure if I wanted to open it. But I did. Page after page of smiling faces. White dresses, pale roses, champagne flutes, Caitlyn's family in coordinated tones. Oliver grinning like the boy I once knew, just taller now, more careful. There were shots of Eleanor, the stepmother, seated in the front row. With Oliver, with Caitlyn, laughing. There were no pictures of me. Not one. Not at the ceremony. Not at the reception. Not on the fringe of the dance floor. Not seated beside strangers at table 17. It was like I'd never been there at all. And for a moment, it almost worked. The erasure. I flipped back and forth through the pages, wondering if I'd imagined my own presence. Then I turned to the final page. And there she was, June, in her too big sweater, her curls frizzing in the breeze, holding a slice of almond cake on a plate. A candid shot. Someone must have taken it without her knowing. She wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking off to the side. Maybe at me, maybe at no one. But she looked full, not empty, not posed, not pretending. Just full of something real. I closed the book. It didn't sting, not anymore. Because for all their curation, all their angles and edits and money, the only photo that felt honest was the one they hadn't meant to keep. I didn't throw the album away. I didn't send it back. I placed it on the shelf next to Julian's old cookbooks, where it would stay. Not as a keepsake, but as a record. Proof of how far people will go to rewrite truth with polish. That evening, I called June. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Grandma." "Hi, darling. I got a delivery today." "Oh, no," she said. "The album?" "Yes." "I didn't know they were sending it. I would have warned you." "I'm glad they didn't." She paused. "Really?" It reminded me that being erased doesn't mean you disappear. It just means you're no longer part of someone else's version of events. "Do you want to talk about it?" "No," I said gently. "I just wanted to hear your voice and to say thank you." "For what?" "For being in the photo that mattered." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "You were in mine too, you know." "In your what?" "My favorite photo from that day." I took it on my phone. It's just your hand, actually, holding mine. I smiled. "Send it to me sometime," I said. "I will." After we hung up, I sat by the window with a blanket over my knees and watched the sun lower itself behind the rooftops. It had been a clear day, the kind that used to make me feel restless. But now I felt still. I didn't need a seat at every table. I didn't need my name in every speech. I just needed my own house, my own voice, and the strength to hold the pen when someone else tried to write my part for me. It rained again that Friday. Not a gentle Portland mist, but real rain. Heavy, determined, like the sky had finally decided it had something to say. I stayed indoors most of the day, moving between small tasks. I cleaned out the spice drawer. I oiled the hinges on the front door. I sorted through old photo boxes, keeping only the ones that made me exhale gently instead of flinch. That afternoon, I pulled down a box labeled Christmas from the hall closet. Inside were ornaments, most chipped, a few handmade. I didn't know why I opened it. December was months away. But maybe I just needed to remind myself of what once felt magical. Near the bottom, I found a card Oliver had made when he was 7. Red construction paper, glitter, glue smudged in every corner. To Mom. "You make the house smell like good things. I love you. Even when you're mad." There was a drawing of me, clearly supposed to be wearing an apron, though I looked more like a firefighter with a cake. I smiled. I didn't cry. Instead, I stood, walked to the kitchen, and taped the card on the fridge. Not out of sentiment, but as evidence of who I was, of who he used to see. Later that evening, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I found Oliver. No call first, No warning. He stood there in a navy coat, hair wet from the rain, holding a small grocery bag. His eyes searched mine, cautious. "Hi," he said. I didn't step aside. "Can I come in for a second?" I didn't answer right away. Then I moved just enough to let him pass. He walked in slowly, like he expected the furniture to look different. He set the bag down on the counter. "I brought almond paste," he said, "and flour, and eggs." I looked at the bag, then at him. "Planning to bake?" "I wanted to learn," he said. "The almond cake. June said you still make it." I raised an eyebrow. "She said you made it for yourself, that you didn't share it." "I didn't," I said. "It wasn't for sharing." He nodded. "I deserved that." I didn't answer. He looked around the kitchen, taking in the card on the fridge. "You kept that?" he asked softly. "For 35 years. He rubbed his hands together. "I was a selfish kid." "You were a child," I corrected. "But you became a selfish man." He flinched, but didn't argue. "Do you want to make the cake or apologize?" I asked. "Both," he said, "if you'll let me." I stared at him, searching for performance. I didn't find it. What I saw was smaller than regret, humbler. Not a grand gesture, just a man with wet sleeves and flour in a bag trying to cross the threshold. "Wash your hands," I said. He did. I pulled out the mixing bowl, measured quietly. He stood beside me, eyes following every motion. When I cracked the eggs, he winced. "I never got good at that." "You never tried." "I thought you liked doing everything." "I liked it when someone noticed." He nodded. We worked mostly in silence. He asked questions when he needed to. I didn't fill the quiet. For once it wasn't awkward, just honest. While the cake baked, we sat at the kitchen table. I poured tea. He didn't ask for sugar. "I know what I did," he said eventually. "At the wedding. Before it. Years of it." I waited. "I kept shrinking you because it made me feel bigger. And I thought maybe if I kept you in the background, people wouldn't see how much I still needed you." I said nothing. "I'm not proud of it." "You shouldn't be." He nodded. "I wish I'd done better," he said. "I wish that too. But I want to start." I sipped my tea. "I know I don't deserve much," he added. "But maybe, if there's any room left, I'd like to be let back in, slowly, on your terms." The oven dinged. I stood, pulled out the cake, set it on the rack to cool. It smelled right. Warm, sweet, almond sharp. I sliced 2 pieces. We ate without ceremony. Halfway through his slice, Oliver set his fork down. "This tastes like Christmas." "It always did," I said. And we sat there, not quite mother and son again, but not strangers. Something quieter, but real. A beginning. The next morning, I woke to a clean kitchen and the faint smell of almond still lingering in the air. Oliver had stayed late, but not too late. He left without asking for anything. No praise, no reassurance, no invitation to return. Just a quiet thank you and a promise. "I'll call before I come next time." It wasn't much, but it was something. I poured tea and stood by the window, watching the light creep across the fence. The day looked like it might stretch wide and quiet. My favorite kind. Then the phone rang. June. "Morning," she said. "I heard he came. News travels fast. I made him call me after. I wanted to make sure he didn't say anything stupid." "He didn't," I said, which in itself is historic. She laughed. "He sounded different. He looked smaller. That's often what honesty does." "Did it feel real?" "I'm not sure," I admitted. "But he brought almond paste. That has to count for something." We talked a little longer. about her new job, her landlord's slow leak repair, the pair of boots she was saving for. She sounded lighter, too, like the weight of choosing sides had finally lifted. After we hung up, I dressed for the day, real clothes, not just the kind you wear to pull weeds. Slacks, a sweater, a pair of earrings I hadn't touched in years. No reason, really. I just wanted to look like someone with plans. I drove to the hardware store to replace a drawer handle that had been loose since 2016. I bought a new plant for the hallway. I walked slowly through the aisles of kitchenware, letting my fingers trail across the polished steel and ceramic like it mattered. Because it did. Because I mattered. Back home, I passed by the bookshelf and paused. The wedding album was still there, untouched since the day it arrived. I pulled it out, flipped once more to the back page, to the image of June. Caught in her own light, holding her cake like a woman holding something more important than dessert. I slipped the photo from the page and tucked it into a new frame, placed it on the mantel. The others, the ones of polished strangers and curated smiles, I left in the album, quietly closed. That night, I roasted chicken again, just for myself. I sat at the kitchen table with a cloth napkin, a glass of wine, and no apology. Halfway through dinner, a message arrived. Oliver. Would you be okay if Caitlyn came with me next time? Only if you're ready. I didn't answer right away. I finished eating. I cleared the table. I folded the napkin, rinsed the plate, and dried the fork. Then I texted back. Me. She may come if she understands she's not coming to defend herself. His reply came fast. Oliver. Understood. I'll make sure she does. And just like that, the ground beneath us shifted again. Not cracked, not fixed, but different. That night, before bed, I lit a single candle on the windowsill. Julian used to do that during power outages. I always thought it was for light, but now I wondered if it had been for something else. A signal, maybe. A reminder that even when things go dark, someone is still here, holding a flame. I let it burn until I fell asleep. They came on a Sunday, not early, late enough that I'd already had time to read the paper, sweep the porch, and drink 2 cups of tea. I wore my green sweater, the one with the frayed sleeves that still made me feel like someone who'd earned the right to be comfortable in her own house. When the doorbell rang, I didn't rush. Oliver stood on the porch again, but this time he stepped aside immediately, letting Caitlyn come into view. She held a small bouquet, not store-bought, wildflowers, tied with twine. Good morning, she said, voice quieter than I remembered. Come in, I said. Shoes off. They did as told. I led them into the living room. It felt smaller now, with all 3 of us in it. I motioned to the couch. They sat, hands close but not touching. I took my chair. There was a silence. Not hostile, just cautious, like animals sniffing the air after a storm. I wanted to say something, Caitlyn began, looking at her lap, and I didn't come to explain away what happened. I waited. I came to acknowledge it. Fully. She looked up. I erased you. I didn't flinch. And I don't have an excuse, she said. I just wanted control of the story, of the image, of everything. And in doing that, I became someone I swore I'd never be. Someone who treats love like a prop? I asked. She nodded. Exactly. Oliver glanced at her, surprised she'd said it so plainly. But she didn't stop. I thought if I kept you in the background, you wouldn't threaten anything. My role, my presence. I thought making you smaller would make the rest of us look bigger. And now? I asked. I see that I only made myself look small. I leaned back slightly, let the weight of her words sit. You brought flowers, I said. She nodded. From my mother's garden. She doesn't know I took them. I allowed myself a smile. Good. That's a start. We sat with that for a moment. I made lemon tart again, she said. Twice, actually. Still too sweet. Try adding salt to the crust, I said. Balance is everything. She looked grateful for the note. Not because it meant approval, but because it meant we were speaking the same language. I won't force us to be close, she added, but I want to earn the chance to be known as myself. Not as the woman who stood between a mother and her son. I looked at Oliver. He hadn't spoken yet. Do you feel the same? I asked. He swallowed. Yes. No conditions? No, he said. Just time. And truth. Truth, I repeated. That's more expensive than most people realize. I know, he said. I'm ready to pay. We didn't hug. There was no music playing. Just the sound of the clock ticking over the mantel and the faint smell of the lavender candle I'd lit before they arrived. I rose from my chair. Tea? They both nodded. I walked to the kitchen, boiled the water, poured 3 cups. 1 black, 1 with honey, 1 with lemon. I still remembered their preferences, not because they'd earned that memory, but because I had. I placed the tray on the table between us. We sipped in silence for a while. Eventually, Caitlyn reached into her bag and pulled out a small frame. I printed something for you, she said. I looked. It was the photo of June, the candid one with the cake, the wind in her hair. I found it on her phone, Caitlyn said. She let me borrow it. Thank you, I said. She said it was the most real moment of the whole wedding. She was right. I took the frame and set it beside the lamp. Oliver finally spoke. I'm sorry it took so long. It always takes longer than it should, I said. But better late than not at all. We didn't fix everything that afternoon. We didn't even scratch the surface. But when they left, they did so quietly, respectfully. And when the door closed behind them, I stood in the hallway and took a deep breath. Then I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and cut a new slice of almond cake. One for myself, and one to wrap in foil for someone else's hands. I used to think silence was strength, that if you didn't speak the hurt, it made you dignified, that if you bore it alone, you were braver. But silence only works if someone's listening in the quiet. Otherwise, it's just erasure you learned to survive. I see that now. 2 months have passed since the wedding, since I flew down to San Diego, sat at the back, and watched my name disappear from my own son's story. 2 months since I came home and remembered who I was, not as someone's mother, someone's guest, someone's mistake, but as someone whole. And now? Now I'm tending things, not people. Things that grow under care, not expectation. My tomatoes are thriving. I planted thyme near the gate. I've started writing again, not letters this time, but recipes, notes in the margins, a different kind of history, the kind you pass down without needing applause. Oliver calls once a week. He's trying. I don't reward him for it, and I don't punish him when he slips. I just answer if I feel like it. That's new for me. Caitlyn sent a book of essays last week. Women on motherhood, aging, identity. There was no inscription. Just a yellow, sticky note on the cover. Page 147 made me think of you. It was an essay about apology, a real one. The kind that doesn't ask for redemption, only recognition. I kept the note. Not because I forgive her, but because I see her trying. June visits often. She's hunting for jobs now, wants to move out within the year. She calls it building her own name. I told her that's all any of us ever do in the end. Some just start later than others. I made her promise one thing, that she'd write it all down. The joy, the doubt, the days she wonders if she's doing anything right. Not because I need to read it, but because someday she will. I've revised my will again. Slightly. Quietly. June gets everything, still. But I added a letter, not legal, not formal. Just one page, tucked behind the trust document. It begins. You don't owe anyone your silence. Not even the ones who gave you life. Especially not them if they ask you to give up your own in exchange. I hope she reads it one day and nods, not with sadness, but with understanding. And me? I still walk to the bakery on Fridays, still sweep the porch, still make too much soup and freeze half of it for no one in particular. I don't look for meaning in every small gesture now. I just live. But when I bake the almond cake, I always make one extra slice. I wrap it in foil. I leave it on the counter, just in case someone comes by. Someone who finally learned how to knock. And if you've read this far, if something in this story sat too close to your own, then hear me, quietly and clearly. You do not have to stay where you're not seen. You are allowed to choose yourself, even if it's late. And if you're holding something in your hands, pain, pride, a recipe no one ever thanked you for, write it down. Tell someone, or tell yourself. But don't let it vanish, because you were here, and you mattered. If this story found you, let it rest here for a moment. If it moved you, share it with someone who needs it too. And if it was you, say something. We hear you. We really do.